liberal arts. I'm proud to be a liberal arts student. I think because I got a liberal arts degree that I was able to become the kind of person that I always wanted to be. And I'm really honored to be on a panel with both of you. I admire you both very much. And I owe Dr. Bacher my entire bachelor's degree. So I'm very happy to be here. Also as the vice president of Muslim Student Association. So both of the professors actually mentioned a lot of the things that I wanted to mention too, but I don't have a problem reiterating. So I do have a couple of stories and just a couple of thoughts. On the topic of surveillance, I can think of one thing that I experienced where I'm 99% sure that our MSA has been surveilled. It was about a couple of years ago. At an MSA meeting, we had decided to host a debate for the members of our club. And just the topic of the debate is very telling about the kind of environment that we're living in. So the topic of the debate was, as Muslims, whenever there's a terrorist attack, should we take an apologetic tone or should we just condemn the violence? And so almost everybody, was on the side of just only condemning, make it clear that we condemn violence, but never take an apologetic tone. But just for the sake of the debate, it's telling that we would organize something like that, that we have to think about those things. And also, sometimes just for our own, it's a coping mechanism to use humor. And so sometimes we joke around about being surveilled, and Islamophobia is so normalized now that we joke around about being surveilled. So on WhatsApp, when they started having the group chats being encrypted, we were like, that's not true. I was just joking with a friend the other day that I really wanted to buy a bomber jacket because they're in style now, the olive green ones, and I was like, I don't think I can call it a bomber jacket. And so yeah, it's just for our it's a coping mechanism for us to joke about it. But in terms of being surveilled, so we were having this debate, and this guy comes in, and he's in this getup where he looks like he just came straight out of the desert. So he had a long white thobe is what it's called, and a walking stick and a turban, and he was a white guy, and so he seemed to kind of fit this very zealous convert kind of stereotype, and so we were like, okay, he's on the condemn side, so we were in the middle of the debate, and then halfway through he goes, well, I agree with what Osama bin Laden did. And the room was silent. We were like, he's recording. If anybody says anything right now that somewhat agrees with him, that's gonna come back and haunt us. And so I don't remember how we got past it, but it was very awkward. And I knew right then that he was probably from some intelligence agency. So that's my example of that. But I have another classroom experience that is a little bit different. So I was in a political science class. By the way, as a Middle Eastern Studies minor and in International Studies, I've taken, I think, almost all of the courses where we've discussed the Middle East, where we've discussed Islam. Some of the professors do a great job, some of them do an okay job. And so in this particular class, we were having a visitor from the German consulate. And it was a very big deal. He was visiting our class, and he was also going to speak at a larger event on campus later that night. And so my professor was excited to have him. We had a few other guests in the room, and he told us ahead of time, we're having an important guest, please, have good questions for him. And so he came, and he was talking a lot about the policies of the European Union. During this semester, it was the semester directly following the Paris attacks and the San Bernardino attack. And it was also around the same time that a lot of news was coming out about people crossing the Mediterranean in boats, trying to get to Europe, and we were just finding out a lot about that. And so that was, he was touching on these topics a lot. And so one of my questions was, what are you doing, or what is the European Union doing about like anti-refugee sentiment, because there was a lot after the Paris attacks. And then more broadly, you know, like, what do you think about the marginalization of Muslim Europeans? You know, what are you doing, like, to I mean, they're marginalized, so what are you doing to like help integrate them and like some sort of economic, I don't know what word I'm looking for, but anyway. And he didn't appreciate my questions at all. And instead of letting me finish, actually, he decided to talk over me and interrupt me and just move on and not let me finish. And my professor did not do a thing. We had other guests in the room, and it wasn't until the next week that my professor actually said to my class, you know, I think Aliyah had some good points. She was getting into some interesting questions. And I said, yeah, I was, but I was being talked over, and I didn't get to finish. And I don't appreciate that. And, you know, that was a professor that I liked. And I didn't think about how much it really bothered me that he didn't defend me until when I was preparing for this. And this is like a year later. And so, I mean, as professors, like, you have to defend your students. You can't let a guest talk over them. This is my university, and it's my place to be inquisitive here. And, you know, to speak more about what you were saying about Muslim students having to, like, tokenize in the classroom and having to, like, I always feel like I have to be sharp. I always feel like I'm obligated to speak up whenever Islam is mentioned, whenever Muslims are mentioned, especially in classes about, like, feminism, especially in classes about women. I have to participate every single day. And I've been doing this, like, since high school. So on that note about those questions that I was asking the guy from the German consulate, is like, you know, maybe it takes me, a Muslim American, to wonder about the condition that Muslim Europeans are living in. I mean, I'm not the only person concerned with those issues, but I was the only person asking those kinds of questions in class. And it kind of raises larger questions about, whenever people talk about immigration into Western Europe, into the United States, we ask this question about whether Muslims or Islam is compatible with liberal democracy. And I think it's the wrong question to be asking in the first place, because when somebody says liberalism, I hear imperialism, and when somebody says democracy building, I hear invasion and occupation. And whenever somebody says saving Muslim women from Muslim men, I hear a justification for war and violence. So I would never seek to be compatible with that kind of worldview. And if I did, I would have to accept that the dominant narrative of Muslims is that we are on the front lines of counterterrorism, as Hillary Clinton said in her debate, and I would have to accept that she thinks that I possess some sort of secret knowledge about terrorism, and that, you know, if I was a good patriotic citizen, I would work with the government. And I completely reject that narrative. So that's why asking whether or not Muslims or Islam is compatible with liberal democracy, that I just think it's a terrible question, because Muslims can think any number of complicated ideas at the same time, and if they want to subscribe to liberalism, they can, but I would not encourage them to. So instead, I'm also not one of those people that thinks that, you know, if we lived in an Islamic society, we would be perfect, and that's the alternative to liberalism. I wouldn't say that either. I'm a lot more interested in pluralism, and I'm not the only one engaging in this critique against liberalism, and I'm actually going to a Shabbat dinner later tonight. And MSA is in a coalition with clubs that represent other marginalized communities, and together we want to envision something better. So what I would ask of you, to defend your students in the classroom, especially when they're offering perspectives that no other students are offering, ASI, we often get, as an MSA, we often get funding from the associated students, and this semester in particular, we've been getting, all of the funds that we've been requesting for the first time. And I don't know, maybe I've just been like making really good presentations. It's the first year that they sent me, so. But one of the members of like the board of control was like, MSA is always putting on these events that like you would never hear these perspectives anywhere else. And so MSA is literally making up for a lack of discussion in academic departments. We put on our own symposium last weekend on the topic of Syria. We're one of the only people talking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict from the perspective of the Palestinians. And we host a student-led Islam 101 session every single week. We never stop. So we're raising our own money and we bring our own speakers because we don't think that the academics on this campus is doing enough. So another thing that I would ask of you is to make a sincere effort to say your students' names right. Dr. Ali Muhammad mentioned this too. And in these times, I'm not in the mood to accept any sort of microaggression. So my great-grandfather was a tailor in India. He tailored men's suits. And so the last name that his colonizer gave him was Taylor. And so before my grandfather, his son, moved to the United States, he decided to change his last name to Shaikh, which would identify him as a Muslim. Indian Muslims, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, have that last name. And I didn't think that was like anything interesting for a really long time. I was like, it's not cool that I have a last name that like thousands of other people have. But knowing that he changed it because he wanted people to know that he was Muslim, like that's something that I'm really proud of. And that he rejected the name that his colonizer gave him. So it's really important that as professors you say your students' names right, even if it takes all semester long, and it shows them that you respect them. So at this point in time, it's not acceptable not to know the basics of Islam. None of us did an Islam 101 presentation for a good reason, and that's because like you're an intellectual crowd, and you should be able to handle learning the basics. And then you should know the incredible intellectual contribution of Muslims to human knowledge. And you should think back to what Dr. Bakr was saying about Descartes and Ibn Sina. In fact, we wouldn't even have universities without a Muslim Moroccan woman in 859 AD. So, the Western Academy isn't the center of the universe. And I say that as somebody who wants to be an academic one day. Yeah, I mean, at this point, if you don't know what a hijab is, you just gotta ask and get it over with. It's one of the largest religions in the world, and you have to know about who practices it. You need to know that Muslims have, become a racialized category. We're often racialized as Arab. I'm not Arab. I know lots of Muslims who are not Arab. I know white Muslims. I know white Muslims. I know Mexican Muslims. I know Chinese Muslims. I know Indonesian Muslims. I know Turkish Muslims. Even well-intentioned people, they come up to us and they say, "We want to know more about your culture." And I'm always like, well, I can tell you about being Indian another time, but I think what you're asking me is about my religion. And you have to be okay with the fact that we're talking about religion right now and not culture. Culture is fun and interesting. We could talk about food and music and clothes, but we're talking about my religion. So even well-intentioned people do this. And this is the bare minimum of what I'm asking you. Maybe it seems like a lot, but I'm not ashamed of that. Lastly, I just want to say that I feel very strongly about young Muslim women, and we're not on the front lines of counterterrorism. Rather, I want to say that we're on the front lines of anti-racism, the front lines of fighting for gender equality, and other things. So when you think of young Muslim women, I want you don't have to imagine me. please don't imagine me, but these are just the qualities that I try to embody, and the qualities that I try to embody today. 1, outspoken. 2, unapologetic. 3, compassionate. And 4, justice-oriented. And that's that. If you're gonna stereotype young Muslim women, that's what you should imagine them as. With that, I pretty much have said everything that I wanted to say. And as a person of faith,